Hello folks, I'm Alex. This is Alex Unabridged. This is episode 2 of my month with, and in February I spent the month with Andy Weir. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Dee Dee also welcomes you back to the channel. Yes, I've got a little friend helping me record this afternoon. So yes, this is the second edition of My Month With, which is my project to read some more of some of the authors that I've read, only a couple of bits of, maybe one or two bits of, and I want to explore further. And this month was the turn of Andy Weir. So I read Project Hail Mary. That was pretty much it. I read one short story by him as well last year, which was okay. But Project Hail Mary was a 5-star book for me. It was an audiobook that I had, which was absolutely phenomenal. One of my favourite reading experiences. Yeah, I like it's number 2 in my all-time favourite books or reading experiences for the moment. So yeah, I really loved it. So I really wanted to get round to reading some more of what Andy Weir has put out. So I picked 2 this month, The Martian and Artemis as well. So I'll get straight into it and we'll start with The Martian. So this follows Mark Watney, who is a botanist and engineer and member of the Ares, one of the Ares missions, which is Mars missions. You know, it's kind of set in a bit in the future, not too much in the future, very much recognisably our world. And he gets left behind on Mars after an emergency exit, essentially, you know, an emergency evacuation. Yeah, he gets hit with some debris in a windstorm, and they think he's dead, but he's not, and he's left all alone on Mars, and he has to survive you know, over 400 days if he's going to be rescued, with just what he's got at the base, at the hab as they call it. It's told partly through log entries from Watney, and then also through more kind of typical sort of third person narrative for some of the characters that we meet who are back on Earth at NASA, who are trying to also, you know, figure out how to get him home safely. So that's the basic premise. I'm sure people know this one. There's been a you know, well-known, reasonably well-received film of it, which I did enjoy, which I've seen multiple times, which I have had to kind of like just try and put that aside when I was reading this as well, like, because I know the film quite well. So yeah. So what did I think of this then? I liked this a lot, which wasn't a big surprise to me, to be honest. As I say, I've seen the film several times, and so I knew I kind of liked the basic story, basic premise, etc. And yeah, the book is, in the most part, much better than the film. So I'm going to do this video a little differently from the last one, and I'm going to go through what I liked about the book, and then anything that I didn't like, and then I'll go through the scores. So what did I like? First of all, Mark Watney is a great character, and certainly one that you want to succeed as you go through. We spend a lot of time with Mark Watney, and yeah, he's a really relatable, really endearing character. He's much more sweary and snarky than the film version, than Matt Damon's version. But it definitely works better for me, this. He manages to keep a positive outlook throughout all of the dire situations that he constantly finds himself in. He's a bit of a rebel against authority, but in a nice way. He's kind of a Mr. Fix-It. He can figure out how to, you know, repurpose things, and that's part of his mission, if you like, whilst he's there, is to try and figure out how to stay alive and how he can use what he's got at hand. He's intelligent, but he's not distant. And he's not immune to kind of making some pretty dumb errors as well. just to make his life a little bit more difficult. The ensemble at NASA are also really likeable, plus the crew that got off Mars when Watney got left behind. They're less developed character-wise, but they're all generally likable characters, even though they're often deeply flawed. They're definitely likable. So I really enjoyed that ensemble. It's really immersive read, you know, largely to how much time we do spend with Watney at the Hab. So you really get, you know, you're spending a lot of time in one place essentially, so you get to know that place and how it works. And the descriptions and all that kind of stuff from Weir are evocative. You know, it's an easy to imagine world, and the scientific and technical elements of this really help with the immersion as well. They're detailed enough to feel plausible for sure, but they're not so, like, you know, hard science that they kind of go over my head. They are very much kind of all the survival science essentially, and how that is obviously very difficult to kind of manage on Mars, which has a very, very different sort of makeup to Earth. As I say, the explanation and the kind of description of the environment are really well done. They are interesting and evocative. Despite the fact that Mars is quite a barren planet, it felt like a very kind of well-realised setting. I can easily picture it. I can easily picture the various different sorts of terrain, things like that we experience. I think it is helpful in that respect, knowing the film and having a visual reference for that. But then again, you know, Mars, we've got plenty of visual references for that. So I think, you know, there's a really good basis for Weir to draw on. But at the same time, he makes it feel like he's kind of got his own, he's put his own stamp on it in terms of the sort of base that is established there for Watney and the crew to live at whilst they were there. The writing's very much what I expected, based on what I knew from Project Hail Mary. It's what I wanted from Weir as well. That's what I liked about Project Hail Mary so much, was the writing style, the character voice of Watney, and the other character voices, to be fair, are all very clear. The dialogue's really punchy. The science is really well and kind of interestingly explained in a fun way. Weir's own authorial voice is really strong in this. It definitely comes through. It's definitely similar to Project Hail Mary in that respect, and it's very funny, this one. Didn't have me laughing out loud quite as much as Project Hail Mary, but again, I knew the story and some of the lines from the film are pulled directly from the book, so it wasn't a surprise to me like that one. It's well paced, well structured. It's got kind of plenty of ups and downs in the plot, plenty of problems to solve. I really liked this back and forth between like Watney's logs and the sort of, as I say, the more sort of standard third person narrative of NASA. There's some other little bits in there as well in terms of how the story's told, and it just kind of mixed it up enough so that I think if it had been all logs, it had been too much, and if it all been told kind of, you know, in a more standard kind of third person narrative, it wouldn't have had the impact. So I think mixing it up worked really well. But yeah, the problems to solve, the puzzle box of a story, is what I really loved about it, and what I wanted for sure, based on my experience with Project Hail Mary, which is another puzzle box kind of story. I really liked the overall concept of it, the kind of survival situation on Mars, just a single astronaut on Mars. And I liked that there was a lot more in this versus the film, the book versus the film, about Mark's journey, about what, you know, he has to do, how he has to, you know, where he has to go on the planet, to try and retrieve things, find things, collect resources, things like that, and also to get to a point at which he can be potentially rescued. So yeah, a lot to like in this, a hell of a lot to like. What didn't I like then? These are kind of like nitpicks, really. They're minor things really, they didn't spoil the enjoyment of it, but it felt a little repetitive at times in terms of the sort of science that it was talking about. It didn't lose me at any point in terms of comprehension of that science, but it did a little bit in terms of engagement. As I say, it's like there's a lot about kind of life support systems, oxygen, carbon dioxide, all this kind of thing, you know, food, heat, all that kind of stuff. And it just, at times, I just felt like, oh, it's more of this again. But then it, you know, it picked up quite quickly. You know, I never felt that it kind of got too entrenched in that. But yeah, there was a few bits where I just kind of was like, yeah, okay, I get it. Move along. The ending, I think, for me, and I'm not going to go into what the ending is in case you haven't read the book or seen the film, but it felt a little bit anticlimactic. I think this is because I've seen the film, and the film ending felt much more kind of actiony and much more tense. So yeah, I think that's the one thing that I'd say in it where I prefer the film. The rest of it, I much prefer the book. But yeah, the ending just fell a little bit flat, I think. So yeah, but not, as I say, not enough to ruin the enjoyment of it. So my scores for The Martian then. I will run through the individual category scores first and then give you the overall scores. So I've given it a 7 for characters. It's solid. It got an 8 for atmosphere. I thought the atmosphere was excellent. It was really immersive. I've got a 7 for writing. Say on the whole, really good. More funny stuff from Weir, but a little bit of repetition. An 8 for the plot. I really enjoyed the plot. I thought it was really well structured, really well thought out plot. I've given it an 8 for ideas. Not necessarily for the science ideas themselves. There's nothing kind of like, you know, really philosophical in this. It's all about the science and the survival and the problem solving, but that's what was really good about it. So it's that kind of problem solving puzzle box element and the ideas that I really like, and the overall concept as well. And my enjoyment of it, I've given an 8. Yeah, it was great. It was a really good fun read. So we add all of those up and divide by 6, and we get a 7.67 out of 10. That will get rounded down to a 7.5 out of 10. And I will put this on Storygraph. Probably, I think it deserves a 4-star, this one, because I would read it again. It's one that I really like. It's charming. There's a charm to it, for sure. So yes, but it's a 7.5 out of 10. It's not the level for me of Project Hail Mary, but it's still one that I say I would read again, and that I really had a good fun time with. Yeah, really good. So on to the second book then, which was Artemis. This one is set on the moon, in the only lunar city, which is Artemis. And we follow Jazz, who is a porter and a smuggler, who is trying to earn enough money to kind of pay off a debt and kind of get out of the little kind of pod hovel that she lives in. This is basically, without giving anything away, you know, spoiler-wise, this is basically a kind of a heist/sabotage kind of story. It's, you know, she gets offered a gig that's going to pay her a ton of money, and, you know, she accepts it, and then all hell breaks loose. So, you know, it's kind of, it's that kind of story. It's kind of heist/sabotage type thing. So, what did I think of this one then? Yeah, I didn't like this one. This one was really disappointing. It felt extremely different to the others that I've read of Weir's, and it just didn't work for me. I will go through the few bits that I did like. There's always stuff that I can find that I do like within something, even if overall I'm not a fan. So what did I like? I liked the general idea and concept of this. Heist on the moon, you know, sort of crime on the moon. That's a good fun idea for me. I really liked the general sort of ideas of what life might be like in a lunar city, which is kind of more of a small town feel, really. I liked some of the world building elements that Weir came up with, how the city functions, for instance, things like the economy, the politics, the balance of power, the power structures, games, etc. Its relationship to Earth, how things work between Earth and the moon, ideas of tourism to the moon, stuff like that. So yeah, some of the ideas that went into, what would this city be like? How would the whole society on the moon work, etc. I really liked that. There were some really good ideas in there. And I really liked some of the elements of Jazz's character, the moments, of strength, and, she's a strong, confident, independent young woman. And yeah, there were certainly elements of her character that I could really get on with. But unfortunately, it's kind of where it ends in terms of things that I liked. What didn't I like then? Generally, the characters. I couldn't connect with them at all. I couldn't really connect with Jazz that much, even though, as I say, there are some good, strong elements to her character. I never really kind of felt that I knew her very well. There's some underdevelopment there. None of the characters, apart from Jazz did feel a bit more sort of three-dimensional, but a lot of the others really didn't. The main thing is they're all either too snarky or sarcastic or gruff, or like they're just, yeah, they're kind of they're quite, one tone. Do you know what I mean? There's not a lot of variety within. There's not complexity particularly within them. I felt like, even though I liked the world building, as I've said, the actual execution of describing the sort of atmosphere and setting to me in the writing, I didn't think was particularly well executed. I couldn't picture a lot of the setting particularly strongly. There were elements of it, as there always are, but overall, it just kind of it wasn't really cohesive for me. The science stuff in this one kind of bored me a bit. It's not interesting in the Martian. It's not presented in an interesting way, I don't think. And it just kind of, I just wasn't interested. It just didn't really kind of do anything for me at all. It was kind of more just kind of a vehicle for some problems within the plot. That's kind of how it felt to me, anyway. I think my main dislike of this is the tone of it, and the fact that it just felt like it was trying too hard to be funny, and not hitting the mark for me at all. As I say, it was kind of overly snarky. It was just, yeah, there were some jokes that really failed to land. It felt overly long. It's not a long book. I think it was about 8 hours, 8.5 hours, something like that. But it felt quite long. It dragged at several points, for sure. It felt almost like it would have been a better short story in some respects. Like it could have been pared down, like the heist and elements of it, could have been pared down. But then the short story that I read by Weir, which the name of which I've forgotten, which I'll put up on screen, like last September, that was kind of heisty as well. So it's obviously one of his things. But yeah, it didn't feel like it had enough legs for me. There were some interludes in it, if you like, or some sections where you kind of get in a back and forth conversation between, or like communications, emails, etc., between Jazz and a childhood sort of pen pal, somebody who she's known for pretty much her whole life, which was, I think, there obviously to kind of develop her character and answer some questions about the differences between life on Earth and life on Mars, and life on the moon, rather, things like that. But it just didn't really execute that very well. It kind of felt a bit superfluous. I think you could have taken those out and I wouldn't really have missed anything. Overall, I think it just felt messy. I think that's the word I can use for it. It just didn't feel like that real good tight structure that I've seen in the previous two pieces of Weir's. It just felt a bit all over the place. It bounced around a little bit, not necessarily in terms of location or plot points or anything like that. It just felt a bit chaotic and not in a good way. Just generally felt quite meh. It's just, I think for me, it was just definitely not anywhere close to the standard of writing from Weir that as I say, I've had in previous experiences, and that's why it's disappointing. It wasn't terrible in terms of the writing. It was okay. It was okay. But for me, the whole package, I just didn't get on with at all. So that's just where I came down on it, really. So let's have a look at the scores I've given it then. Okay, so for character, it's got a 5. It was okay. It was a bit poor, but it wasn't terrible. I've also given a 5 for atmosphere. As I say, I liked the world, I liked some of the world building stuff, but it just didn't feel executed right for me. The writing I've also given a 5 to. It's definitely a slip from his previous efforts. Plot also gets a 5. It just wasn't anything particularly that kind of I engaged with that much. It wasn't that exciting. There were a couple of exciting bits later on in it, but a lot of it I was kind of just like, come on, get it going. Ideas, I've given it a 3. I think that's where it really falls down for me. As I say, it just felt very, very meh. There wasn't anything of any depth in there to me at all. And the heist kind of sort of sabotage type story, the general kind of plot type, if you like, didn't feel like it really did anything particularly new. And it just didn't engage me particularly. And my enjoyment score for it was 4. As I say, it felt it dragged for me. I was kind of like, okay, well, I'll listen to it and get it, get it read. It might pick up. It picked up a little bit towards the end as you get towards the climax, but it never really kind of made me go, oh, okay, now we're talking. So it's a 4. I didn't particularly enjoy the read of it, I have to say. So for the overall rating then, once we add up those 6 scores and divide by 6, we get a 4.5 out of 10. And this will go on Storygraph as a 2-star. It's one of the most disappointing ones I think I've read in a while. Just as I say, it's just very much a kind of read. At no point did I consider DNFing it because it's short. But it did feel like it took longer than it should have done. And the one thing that I would say as well is it was an audiobook narrated by Rosario Dawson, who did a decent enough job with Jazz, the character of Jazz, but some of her accents for the other characters were terrible, laughable, which didn't help with the immersion, especially British accents. If somebody does a really terrible British accent, that pulls me out of it as well. So that may be an element of it. But generally, her narration of Jazz was decent, definitely. But just not one for me, this one, I think. So overall then, after reading Project Hail Mary a couple of years ago, I would have been ready to buy anything at all that Andy Weir released, straight away. And the same could be said after I'd read The Martian, because I read that first. But after Artemis, I would think twice about making a day one purchase on anything that he puts out. I would have to seriously consider what type of story it is, I think. He does really well, or has done really well, with both The Martian and Project Hail Mary at this kind of single character stuck in space having to solve problems. this kind of, the scientific puzzle box plot, when you're getting really involved with one character who's got to figure their way out of this set of problems. And he does really well with the science side. I mean, you've got Watney, who is, as I say, a botanist and engineer, and he's logging all that he's doing, and he's very kind of straightforward in the way that he talks, so it's very easy to follow. It's interesting, it's fun. In Project Hail Mary, you've got Grace, who's the teacher. He's a teacher, or he was a teacher. And so the way that he explains things is in a very teacherly way, and it's great. It just makes it very, very engaging and very, very understandable. But with the sort of the difference in story in terms of the heist type stuff, and certainly with Jazz is a very different kind of character in Artemis, that explanation of the science just doesn't have the same impact for me at all. So I will read more of Weir's when he releases more, for sure, because he's written 2 very good ones, one of which is a favourite of mine, an absolute favourite of mine. But I would definitely be very choosy about what kind of plot or what type of story that I go for with him, and see what he does next, basically. So there we go. That was February and my month with Andy Weir. So March then, which we are into now, is my month with Angela Carter. And so we've got some fantastical magical realism with Wise Children and The Magic Toy Shop are the 2 that I'm doing this month. So I will be back at the beginning of April with the wrap up for that. But that is all from me today. Thank you very much for watching, folks. As always, do drop your thoughts in the comments below. I will be back on Tuesday with a tag video, the I'm so annoyed tag. So it'll be a little bit of a rant from me on Tuesday. But I hope you'll join me for that then. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.